Reed Callahan had embraced the isolation of the Pacific Northwest, trading the noise of the city for the quiet hum of the towering pines and jagged mountain peaks. Once a dedicated wildlife biologist, now a man of solitude, Reed found solace in the wilderness, away from the frantic pace of modern life. But even he couldn't have predicted the encounter that would change his life forever. It was early morning when Reed, deep in the forest, heard a deep, agonizing grunt, sharp enough to cut through the stillness of the frosty landscape. He followed the noise cautiously and soon discovered a massive brown bear, her paw trapped in a cruel steel snare. Her fur was soaked with blood, and her pain-filled eyes locked onto Reed's with a mixture of fear and defiance. Reed's instincts told him to retreat, but something in the bear's gaze stopped him cold. "It's okay," he whispered, trying to soothe her with his voice. The bear growled, her muscles taut and ready to strike. "I'm not here to harm you," Reed murmured again, his hands shaking as he worked to release the trap. The harsh, metallic clink rang out in the frozen air, and with one final tug, the trap gave way, freeing her paw. The bear, her eyes still fixed on Reed, stepped back. For a brief moment, Reed expected an attack, but instead, the bear limped into the forest, vanishing into the shadow of the trees. Reed thought that would be the last he'd see of her, but fate had other plans. A few days later, a fierce storm swept through the mountains, its icy winds howling with unrelenting force. Reed, stacking firewood outside his cabin, noticed a familiar shape cutting through the swirling snow. It was her, the bear, now known to him as Kaya. But this time, she wasn't alone. Two smaller figures flanked her, a pair of cubs, their eyes wide and uncertain. Before Reed could react, Kaya turned, growling low, and led her cubs back into the wilderness. Reed shook his head, perplexed but not entirely surprised by the wildness of it all. That evening, as the storm raged, a sharp, frantic scratching at his door shattered the silence. When Reed opened it, Kaya was there, snow falling from her fur, her gaze steady as she beckoned him with a single glance. She turned and began to walk away, pausing only to make sure Reed was following. Without hesitation, Reed grabbed his coat and flashlight, stepping into the storm. The wind was bitter, but Kaya pressed on, carving a path through the snow with ease. They trudged through the freezing forest for what felt like hours, the world around them a swirling blur of snowflakes. Finally, Kaya halted and growled softly. Reed's heart pounded as he spotted two figures huddled beneath a low tree, their faces pale and frozen with cold. A boy and a girl, too young to be caught in the storm alone. It was a miracle they were still alive. "Hey, it's okay," Reed called softly, kneeling beside them. The girl stirred, her lips quivering as she tried to speak, but no sound came. "Don't try to speak," Reed reassured her. "I've got you." He carefully lifted the boy first, holding him close, then helped the girl to her feet. She stumbled, but Kaya nudged her forward with unexpected tenderness. The journey back was grueling, the storm unforgiving. Reed's body screamed in exhaustion as he carried the boy, his arm wrapped around the girl to support her. Kaya walked beside them, a steady presence in the chaos, sniffing the air, ensuring the way was clear, and growling at unseen threats. When they finally reached the cabin, Reed nearly collapsed from fatigue, but the sight of the flickering hearth urged him on. Inside, the warmth of the fire washed over them, a stark contrast to the raging storm outside. Reed wrapped the children in blankets and offered them warm tea. The girl, her voice hoarse, whispered their names, Amara and Lucas, before exhaustion overtook her. Their frost-bitten fingers burned as Reed carefully worked to ease the pain, applying ointments and rubbing warmth back into their limbs. Kaya stood by the door, her eyes scanning the room, her protective instinct never wavering. Reed turned to her, his voice thick with gratitude. "You saved them, Kaya. You saved their lives." Kaya huffed, a soft, misty breath escaping her as she turned, disappearing back into the wilderness, her form vanishing into the snowy night. As the storm raged on outside, Reed remained at the children's side, keeping a watchful eye on their breathing, ensuring the fire burned bright. When the first light of dawn finally broke, the blizzard had passed, leaving behind a tranquil world blanketed in snow. Amara and Lucas were still weak, but the color slowly returned to their cheeks with each passing hour. The news of the daring rescue spread quickly. A ranger arrived to reunite the children with their frantic family, who had been desperately searching for them. Their tearful gratitude was overwhelming, but Reed could not take full credit. "It was Kaya," he said quietly. "She led me to them." The tale of Kaya's bravery captured the hearts of many, and soon the small community began to speak of the unlikely bond between Reed and the wild bear. News outlets came, documenting the story, and letters poured in from people who had their own encounters with wildlife, or who simply wanted to thank Reed for reconnecting them with nature's beauty. The town organized its first Wild Heart Festival in honor of the rescue, a celebration of the coexistence between humans and animals. Reed, though initially reluctant, agreed to participate. The festival featured art shows, educational talks, and conservation fundraising efforts. At the event, Reed shared his story with a captivated audience. "Kaya didn't see me as an intruder," Reed said, his voice strong but humble. "She saw me as a part of her world. It wasn't just instinct that drove her, it was a deeper connection." The applause was thunderous, but it was the conversations that followed that stayed with Reed. Parents spoke of how they were inspired to teach their children about wildlife, artists gifted him paintings of Kaya, and conservationists pledged to protect the wildlands they all cherished. As the seasons passed, Kaya's visits became less frequent, and Reed suspected her cubs had grown and moved on. But still, he kept an eye on the tree line, hoping for a glimpse of her. On calm evenings, he would sit on his porch, coffee in hand, and remember the bear who had shared a bond with him beyond words. Years later, when Reed passed on, the community honored his legacy by planting a grove of aspens near his cabin, calling it Callahan's Refuge. It became a place of peace and reflection, a sanctuary for both people and wildlife, a reminder of the fragile beauty of the natural world. Though Kaya's footprints had long since faded, her spirit remained in the hearts of those who knew her, an enduring testament to the deep bond between man and beast.